Okay, guys, our next speaker, so excited that he's here, Jeremy Soule. Jeremy first contacted me out of the clear blue sky on Twitter maybe about a year ago, and he said, he told me a little bit about himself. I thought, who is this guy? I looked him up, and he has a Wikipedia page that's a mile long. He created he's considered to be the John Williams of video game music, and created the musical scores for many of the best-selling video games of all time. I don't play video games, but people that do immediately know titles like Skyrim, Harry Potter, Star Wars, and he did the music for these. And what he came to realize, and he'll tell you his story, so I don't want to steal his thunder at all, is that part of the success of these games had a lot to do with the music and the way he was able to integrate that immersive technology, music, with the visual experience. And what I came to realize as I listened to him, and he's really quite remarkable and a polymath, and knows about a lot more than just music, is how to integrate sort of science, technology, sound to drive human emotions in ways that until I guess recently we didn't even know was possible. So I knew I had to have him here to teach us more about this other aspect of virtual reality. How can we supercharge the experience even further using sound, and how can we break down the science, as he calls it, the molecules of music. So take it away, Jeremy. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to hearing you break it down for us.
Thanks so much, Brennan. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you and all of you out in cyberspace. It's a long journey from my little town in Iowa where I started wishing that I had a computer, let alone find ways for music to take pain away from people. And I think my background, as Brennan was talking about, really comes from about 23 years in the video game industry. I worked on some of the highest selling video games of all time, and I was lucky to work with some brilliant people. Working with George Lucas, J.K. Rowling, working with Todd Howard on the Elder Scrolls. There was just so many fortunate things that happened in my life. But I really feel that in all of this process, I had to do a lot of self-examination. I had to really understand how does music contribute to interactivity. And I've been a student of interactivity since I could play an Atari 2600. And those video games, not only could you play them professionally, but you could actually get a job making video games. That's what my dad figured out later on. It wasn't such a bad gig. So I think that one of the side effects of all this self-study and the study of interactivity was that I had to take criticism. I had to listen to other people about what I was doing. Because if that loop wasn't closed, then I was never going to get any better. In fact, in this industry, you have to be the best. You have to be really, really great at what you do. You're only as good, as they say in the music business in this town, as your last 4 bars, as your last 4 bars of music. Well, I was only as good as my last video game, so I needed that extra push and be a part of the team and do everything I could. And they say in film industry, music is your last opportunity to fix it. And I always felt, too, that, you know those 2 grumpy old guys in the Muppets? I'm like that now because I've been in the industry so long, everyone that makes games is like half my age. So I'm the grumpy guy that says, hey, why don't we re-edit that cutscene? That doesn't look good. And that's what I end up doing now. So I feel like I'm more in the mentorship part of my career, and I want to pass along some of the things that I've learned. Now, there are medical professionals in this room. I'm an entertainment guy. And so what I've found, is anecdotal. There's no white papers, there's no New England Journal of Medicine reports on this stuff. There is some anecdotal things here and there, and as one of our fine gentlemen said, we hear that, oh yeah, that's cool a lot, but is that going to, is that a report that we can submit to the NIH? And so what I'm hoping is to start a conversation around music, start a conversation around where we are in understanding the fundamentals of sound in the brain and the cognitive process, how we can look at prosodics, we can look at language syntax, we can look at music theory, and at some point, maybe in the distant future, maybe in the not so distant future, we will have a theory of everything when it comes to sound and communication. And that's really my goal. And so being a composer, I'm always studying the work of other composers. And of course, it's very flattering when they say John Williams of the games industry. I did work on Star Wars. And we may see a little bit of Star Wars later on in my presentation. But this emoticon here is a composer's nightmare. No emotion whatsoever. The flat face, it's not even, I mean, if you have a frown or you got a smile, either one of those are fine. They're great, right? They can hate you, they can love you. But if you got that, you're not selling any video games, I'll tell you that. And one of the things about music and sound in video games is that, has anyone played Angry Birds? Oh my gosh. I mean, half of that experience is those birds making all those sounds and the music going nuts. And that was a very extremely successful game that took full advantage of grabbing the brain and making the experience addictive. And I like to joke with Brendan, my job is to help addict people to software because we want them to spend hours and hours. His job is to unaddict people. So maybe we can compare notes and we'll find how this whole thing works. And my first VR experience was with a Vive. I had unit number 8 on my head, and I was looking through this thing, and I'd been dreaming about VR for years. And when I finally experienced, I was up at Valve Software, and I signed every NDA. I don't even know if I can say I was there. And here was this very handmade looking thing on my head, but it was incredible because for the first time in VR as a composer, and again, you have to be in the headset to understand what VR is about. And this was the first time I experienced VR, and I felt small and I felt large. People know what this, people have done these demos, they know what I'm talking about. And the sense of scale, and of course I did the plank. Everybody, you're gonna go out and save the cat? No, cat, get out of here. Yeah, I'm not gonna go out of here. No, I'm gonna die. I did the plank. And even being a jaded video game developer and knowing everything around me is synthetic, is a video game. My brain's like, no way, dude, we're not going out on that plank. That is when I knew that this was more than a video game, that VR was more than a simple exercise of a video card spitting a bunch of stuff on the screens in front of your head. And it's also a very powerful emotive tool that kills things like this happy face, non-face, I want to call it. So today I don't have a lot of time, and this is a very complex subject matter. I mean, we could go on and on and on about, interactivity, game theory, amazing things that we've been able to discover along the way. So what I want to do is we call it the molecules of music. I just want to talk about the 12 notes in the scale, and literally not the music theory definition, not what you're going to go to Yale or Stanford or Juilliard to learn, but the practical application of a commercial composer and how myself and many of my colleagues look at the intervals of pitches. And if we can understand the basics, the molecules of the scale, and I can illustrate something, I'm going to have this very, very geeky looking vector scope that we're going to look at here in a minute. But if I can illustrate how the concept of sonus works, you have consonant and you have dissonant sound, then you start to understand that music is a language, much like words, and you have emphasis and stress, and you have the vocabulary and grammatical rules. You have that in Western music. Now, I want to preface everything I'm saying that today's talk is about really Western music and how we deal with the 12 tones. Ideas of dissonance and ideas of consonance, and I'll explain more what that is when you see it here in a minute, varies culturally around the world. So I have some friends that are, ethnomusicologists and music anthropologists and people who study these variations and historic developments around sound and communication. And for instance, in Bali, their idea of dissonance and their culture differs from maybe here or in European cultures. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the molecules of music. And we can bring the volume up, please. Okay, so what we have here is a fundamental tone, the first note of 12. And if you're seeing this thing that looks like a donut, it's called a vector scope. And we don't have to get into the science of how a vector scope works, but what I want all of you to see is the simplicity versus complexity. And what we're going to see is we're going to see a pattern of simplicity is consonants. Simplicity is what the brain enjoys. Dissonance or complexity are also married together on the vector scope. So as we start to look at, we're going to take two notes at this time, and we're going to just start out and we're going to go up the scale. So how many pianists or keyboardists or musicians do we have in the room? Okay, so you understand. So we're going to start with the first tone, and then we're going to play. You see a little keyboard up in the upper corner there. We're going to play two notes at once. This is very basic, right? But I just, it's so fundamental, it's so important to composition, I wanted everyone to get a sense of this. So we just heard one note by itself, we heard the tone. What we're about to look at is the musical equivalent of this. This is the bitter face. And so I like to say that the 12 notes in the scale almost represent things like countenance, facial expressions, and also stance. John Williams, I guess, has been known to say that he determines tempo by how fast someone walks. If someone's walking very quick, like a presto, you can literally take the biomechanics of somebody's walking and you turn it into a tempo, and that creates a mood. And just harmonies also can create a mood. And if you look at his face, it's all bunched up, right? And when we have a minor second interval, meaning you take the first note, the C, and you put it up against a C sharp, they're real close together. Just like this guy's face, the countenance is squeezed together, and this is what this sounds like. Okay, the first tone. Now you're hearing some bitterness. And what you just saw on the vector scope was a very complicated cylindrical shape, very complex. When the brain is faced with complexity, it tends to be alarmed by that. It takes effort, it takes energy to do that. It's like 1 + 1's fine, okay, we're comfortable with that. But give me a logarithm and tell me to do it in my head, okay, where's the cliff notes? Where's the cheat sheet? So that's an example, prime example, minor second is an example of dissonance. And again, very complex on the little red box there where it says mono, very complex looking shape. The brain is hearing that and it's thinking it's a unpleasant facial expression, but in the form of harmonics. Now, the next interval, what we're going to do is we're going to keep playing the tone and we're going to move, instead of a half step up, we're going to move a whole step up to basically a whole step interval. And you're going to hear the tone, and you're going to hear the second note. And in commercial composition, a lot of composers understand this to be the question mark. What does this mean? Is it a happy thing? Is it a sad thing? Is it a bitter thing? No, not really. It's more like, dun, dun. What are we? Okay, you're thinking, like, what is this about? So again, there's kind of a relationship between our inner dialogue and our inner thought process and tone. So here we go. What you'll notice on the vector scope, the little cylinder spinning around, there's less complexity there than there was on the minor second. So this is more of a consonant, not a dissonant. And again, not a euphoric or a happy or sad thing, but what's coming next? Well, in voice leading, you would want to we have what's called a resolve. So that's inherently an unstable interval, but it's not bitter. Here is a resolve to what I call sad. And in Western music, the minor third interval, people associate it with sadness. Sad songs are usually always minor, or they're major and very slow, but minor is usually the rule. So we're going to move our interval up again, up to a minor third, and you're going to see some dissonance. different facets there that you just saw. I'm going to go quickly to happy. You saw the complexity there. Minor, what you're going to find, and what we find in a vector scope, and what the ear is hearing is more complexity, which is why it's sad. It's the brain is weighed down with something that it's pondering it hasn't resolved. So this guy obviously is, he's done VR treatment here at Cedars-Sinai, and he's pain-free. And look at the vector scope, and you will see this third interval, now a major third interval, is going to have less complexity, less lines in the vector scope. That's probably a 40% reduction in complexity. The brain likes major sounds, and we equate that with happiness. Complexity, sadness. So therein is the sort of the facial countenance part of the scale. That's how I relate it and how some of my friends in composition relate it. So when we're trying to describe someone's emotion or their mood with the face, we tend to do it with those first three intervals. So the next part of the scale is kind of interesting because these are called the open intervals, and inherently they're neither major nor minor. So they're neither, and on Western terminology, we're not thinking of them as happy or sad. Instead, I like to think of these as sort of the warrior intervals. And the fourth is like this, he's this tall, and the fifth is this tall. So just like Elon Musk and his rocket leaving the launch pad, we're getting farther away from, modestly far away from home base, which is the bottom tone, all right? So at the fourth, what we understand in music and commercial music is that there's a determination that's on an open interval. And you're going to feel the determination. I call this the warrior has not yet conquered. More of this stance. Not standing and proud, but more in a stance of battle, ready to go to the next level. And you'll see this in the vector scope. Quite a bit less complexity than what we had with the minor second, major second, minor third, and major third intervals. That's because this is an open interval. That means more of the partials are aligning. Now, I could get into what a partial is. We don't have time for that today. We're looking at shapes, and we're saying, oh, we could equate this with some guy with his happy look from Cedars-Sinai treatment. So here we go. Now the warrior is scared because you're in the middle of battle. And the augmented fourth interval is what I use for terror. It's what a lot of people use for terror. In fact, the Catholic Church at one point, I think, banned it illegal. They called it the devil's tone. Because it is one of the most unstable intervals in the scale. So when you want scary, John Williams is going to be reaching for an augmented fourth. This is our guy. Now, scary can be seen in a vector scope. And you're going to see this thing shake around, and it's going to look like a mess. So here we go. More facets, more complexity. It's spinning around. There's so many lines in that we can never even count them, right? Okay, so the battle has been won. We're now in an open interval. And you're going to notice that this open interval is actually simpler than the fourth interval and infinitely simpler than the interval you just saw from a geometric standpoint. And hurrah, we defeated the dragon. Isn't that beautiful? So simple. And the fifth is an interval of satisfaction. It's neither minor, it's neither sad, it's neither happy. But when I'm reaching for accomplishment in a score and a narrative, I'm going for the fifth. Now, why does all this matter? I want to just preface the next bits of the scale by saying that I'm a musical narrator, and so my job as a composer is to talk to the player in language. So what I'm doing is I'm teaching you the very basics of meaning and of intervals, of the simplest intervals that we can, just one note with another note. Because in my career, and I think this might be part of why some of our games were very successful. Obviously, I think the art and graphics and storyline is immensely important, but the thing that I tried to contribute in all the games that I've worked on is to create music that is emotionally supportive to the player. So, simple example. Guy has sword, he's battling dragon. Normally, a lot of composers will take a scene like that and they'll create this scary, horrible music to indicate impending death or doom. And for me, that didn't work. So, oh my God, we're being killed by a dragon. No, I didn't write that in the music. What I wrote was, you're a hero. You're capable of defeating this dragon, and you will overcome. And that's the message that I've always provided as emotional support, using this, starting at the most basic level with these intervals, and understanding what they mean in the context of our culture. That creates a fabric, and a fabric that creates a relationship between the software and the game player. So this is kind of an interesting part. This is looking. Once you've conquered, what are you doing next? You're looking to the future. All right. And there's different ways to look to the future. Now this guy here is sad about the future, and what we're going to experience next is a minor sixth interval. And you're going to see more complexity in this than you'll see in a major. So minor and diminished and rubs, they contain more complexity. Again, harder for the brain to process. But you'll see why he's a little bit sad when you hear this interval. It's a beautiful shape. So he's looking, I like to think when we get to the sixth intervals, he's looking up. This is how we communicate in music. Now, look what happens with looking to the future in a positive, hopeful sense. Look how much simpler the geometry is on the vector scope. Again, we had like a flower of facets in the minor, and it became more open on the major. It became simpler, it became easier for the brain, more rewarding for the brain, a happier experience for the brain. Now, the next interval is kind of my favorite. We flat seventh or augmented sixth. We're going now. We're almost to the top. We're almost to the top octave. But there's some questions about the future, not just hopeful for the future, not sad for the future, not hopeful for the future, but there are some questions about the future. And this interval is particularly interesting because it's more unstable than a minor sixth or a major sixth. And you'll be able to see this on the vector scope. And again, a barrel of geometry there. More lines than we can count. Clearly indicating more stress in the balance of the interval. And now we're wondering what happens next. And what happens next, one of my favorites, the major seventh interval. Now we've almost gone through all 12 tones, and we've almost completed the journey. And here we are. She's at that moment. And in music, I would be describing these intervals to say, you're almost there, hero. You're going to get there. You're going to make it. This is perfect. This is a perfect interval for that. From a geometry standpoint and also from a musical meaning standpoint, there is a parallel. Incredible amount of tension in that. So once you've reached the top of the world and top of the mountain, it's the most relaxing thing, right? So if what I'm describing, and these rules apply, of complexity versus simplicity, dissonance versus consonant, then the octave should be the most peaceful, open thing possible, because now we were relieved, we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. In the language of music, I'm presenting harmonically the simplest thing I can, and let's see if it's true on the vector scope. And that's Bill. That's Bill's fault. But I'm controlling all this with my brain, right? This is amazing technology. There you go. Oh, right after, yeah, there you go. I'll do it. And here we are, after all that trauma of a Windows update. Look at that. Resolved. And this is why symphonies are ended. This is why video games are ended. This is why, at the end of Star Wars, you're hearing something like that. Because the brain loves simplicity. We love the peaceful resolve. And we put a period at the end of the sentence. And that's just what we've done with the music. And so this is how, in a way, music parallels the written word. This is how it parallels language. And they say that music is the universal language. And I say I've got this bomb counting down here. So I'll finish this up real quick. Darth Vader is evil. We know that, right? Let's see if we can find the evil in the videos. And we're going to skip past this because I think everyone's got it by now. There we go. There's Darth Vader. I had to get that worked in. This is an interesting theme. Now, the purists are going to say that's the Empire theme. That's not Darth Vader's theme. Don't you know anything, Jeremy? I'm going to get like 400 angry tweets about that. I got people, people know. But to me, Darth Vader runs the Empire. That's why I have that little association there. So what we're going to do is going to look at the first few notes. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's a minor note, or minor chord. Complexity. Less complexity on the major. So maybe Darth's not a bad guy, right? Until you get to the next part. We just threw some evil in there because we have a rub between a B and a C. The evil is so obvious in this, and that's my presentation. Thank you so much.